The Democratic Detonation Warbond just dropped, so it's time to drop a new weapons tier list for my thoughts on all the new guns they added. Do any of these weapons completely change the game? Now, before we get into that, I'm going to let you guys know I'm using a different tier list format because in some of my previous tier lists, people were commenting on my specific placements of guns without understanding my reasoning for it. So this video and any tier list going forward will explain that a bit better. So let's quickly explain my current tier list and then we could talk about all the new guns and what they added to the game. But as always, timestamps will be included in the video for anyone who just wants to skip around. And be sure to like and subscribe to spread my content to other Helldivers, and let's dive right in. So explosive weapons are at the top of my list because they have a unique advantage with dealing with medium enemies and even heavy enemies to a certain extent. Explosive damage does more against weak spots compared to non-explosive. Scorcher is still at the top of my list in this current patch, and the fact that primary weapons can have this versatility will always keep them at the top of the list for me. However, we also have the trash clear section of the list. If you're bringing support weapons that can deal with the heavies, you want a gun that can deal with all the little dudes. You don't have to run any of those quote-unquote S-tier explosive weapons because a build that runs support weapons for heavies and then any of these trash clear weapons will be equally as good as using explosive weapons with a different setup. There's different weapons for different situations. So even though for me personally, I prefer using the explosive weapons, it's just my style. Some of my builds and setups, I pick these trash clear weapons. Like when I'm running rocket launchers to kill Bile Titans, I will pick the Breaker Incendiary against all the hunters. So these top two tiers are pretty much the S tier as well as A tier weapons. And I kind of ordered them within those tiers, but that's just my general explanation on it. And then we have the solid for medium enemy weapons. I even think the Diligence is solid in team play if you're the person staying at a distance and taking on that sniper role. But any of the weapons in this tier are really only going to be considered A tier to me. They aren't really S tier weapons in my opinion. And then we have all the weapons that I think are mid. You can use them, but they're not great in my opinion, and you could definitely bring a better option than any gun on this section. Now, before we get into the Democratic Detonation placements, we got to give a shout out to the Thermite Grenades. They're very cool, they make pretty fireworks, but that's about it. They seem absolutely bugged right now and very inconsistent. Hopefully this gets fixed and then maybe they get a buff if they still need it at that point, and then we could do some showcases with them, but as of right now, they really aren't it. So first, let's talk about the Adjudicator. This weapon is really cool. It has my favorite name of any of the new weapons because it's like au jus sauce on top of a Terminator body, and it's probably the best marksman rifle in the game. But unfortunately, marksman rifles in this game are very underpowered, so that's not saying that much. Luckily for us, there have been some polls in the main Discord and many people are voting that marksman rifles are underpowered, so it's actually likely they'll get buffed pretty soon, and hopefully this gun will get a buff as well. Now, a lot of people have said they don't like the recoil on this gun. Personally, I don't mind the recoil. I'm pretty decent at using it, I would say. I'm also on keyboard and mouse. I don't know if it's harder to control on controller. In my opinion, the damage of it isn't bad. My biggest gripe with it is the amount of ammo it gets. It's a assault rifle or a marksman rifle, meaning it's not going to one tap or two tap any sort of medium enemies. You have to put a decent amount of bullets in them to kill them. But what ends up happening is you will find yourself running out of ammo very quickly, and that is my biggest gripe with it. The gun only comes with 6 magazines, and I think it needs at least 12. And at that point, if it got an ammo buff, I would put it into this spot right here, solid for medium enemies. So even if they fixed my ammo issue that I have with it, it wouldn't be S tier or anything like that, just very solid. And I'm not someone who thinks every gun needs to be S tier, so that's honestly good enough for me. But in its current state, it feels like it's at the top of mid tier because it does feel very fun to shoot. It's a sort of battle rifle style rather than a marksman rifle. It's very fun to use. I honestly don't mind the recoil. I like how it handles. It's great to use in full auto. It's great to use in semi. And in general, I've actually had a lot of other people say this is their favorite rifle in the game right now. But it does feel a little bit underpowered and it does need a slight buff. So in the meantime, it's going to stick around in the top of mid tier. All right, so now let's move on to the star of the Warbond, the Eruptor. This gun is amazing and it's an explosive weapon going into our explosive tier. Honestly, it's so good right now. I don't know if it is actually better than the Scorcher. It probably is low-key, but it's either in the first or the second slot. For now, since it's brand new and I like using it, I'm gonna put it at the top. Now, this gun shoots bullets that explodes shrapnel and can take out large groups of enemies like crazy. The best way I've found to shoot this thing is to actually aim it into enemies further back in the group. So if you come across a patrol, you don't want to shoot the first enemy closest to you. You want to shoot an enemy behind them, because the explosive shrapnel will bounce from that enemy in the middle of that group to the enemies all around them. You can literally get like 10 kills per shot easily if it's a bunch of small enemies. And if it's medium enemies, you can clear the group in like 2 or 3 shots maximum. Now, this gun fires really slow to balance this out, but luckily Thunderpika in my Discord found a way to animation cancel the bolt and rapid fire this by swapping to your support weapon and swapping back between shots. But later, I realized you can actually just animation cancel it by holding down the fire button as if it's full auto and just opening your stratagem menu. And by doing this animation cancel, it feels insane because you eliminate the single drawback of the slow fire it has. Now, this is very fun to do and it's pretty addicting to shoot it like this, but for anyone who doesn't want to animation cancel, you can almost treat it as a slow firing support weapon. It actually feels like a support weapon. And then bring a support weapon like the medium machine gun, like the flamethrower, and let those guns clear the trash for you. I was running this with the medium machine gun against bugs yesterday, and I was just bringing expendable anti-tanks or the orbital precision strikes or a 500 kg to kill bile titans for me, and it felt amazing against the bugs. Now, on the other hand, against the bots, it can absolutely wipe groups of devastators, and I was pairing this with the autocannon, swapping between the 2 weapons on the new defense mission, and again, it just felt really amazing to shoot. And overall, this gun is easily S tier against both factions. The one drawback is the slow fire rate, but it actually does have a second drawback in that you don't want to shoot any enemy that gets close to you at all. So actually do not use this with the grenade pistol. Make sure you keep your Redeemer, because you'll quickly find out if you bring your grenade pistol with this gun that you'll be missing your Redeemer to take out any hunters that get close to you. And then the last thing is the ammo economy of this gun feels pretty great. I never felt like I was ever out of ammo using this, just picking up supply packs when it was off cooldown or random ammo packs you find around the map. The ammo economy of this gun feels fine. All right, so now we get to talk about the explosive crossbow. Now, the explosive crossbow is honestly a solid option for trash clear. It has a good fire rate, it has a large AoE, so again, don't shoot this gun too close to yourself. I think I want to play with this gun actually a bit more to get a better feel for it. One thing I will say is it kind of differs from the other explosive weapons in that it didn't seem like it killed medium type enemies very quickly. I'm honestly more inclined to put it into trash clear. But the thing about this gun is it can one-shot groups of hunters, it can one-shot groups of smaller enemies, and it can deal with hive guards pretty well. In my opinion, this gun actually feels like a much better plasma punisher, and I mean that in terms of how the bullet arcs. The plasma punisher felt more like a manual mortar where you kind of had to fire it up in the air and kind of try to land it on groups yourself. But the crossbow doesn't have that same sort of bullet drop. It's a lot more manageable and easier to use. In general, this gun is a solid A tier sort of weapon, but we'll put it somewhere in the middle of trash clear. I think people in general are underrating this gun from what I've seen, and just because this gun will one-shot any small enemy in the game, and for that matter, it one-shots groups of small enemies. Now, one thing I want to say about this weapon is I really wish it were one-handed so that I could use it with the ballistic shield against the bots. We really need more one-handed weapons in this game, and this would be a perfect weapon to go into that sort of slot, because if you equip this and a ballistic shield, you could kind of run around and roleplay like a medieval knight from the 1200s, except you're on a futuristic planet fighting against Terminators. Now, I actually really hope Arrowhead watches this video and hears me say this, because the ballistic shield mains really need more variety, and this gun would be so cool as a one-handed weapon, and then it would actually fill a niche that desperately needs it, because as of right now, this gun doesn't necessarily feel special. It's definitely better than mid. I think it's a solid A tier weapon, just from me using it and my thoughts on it personally. But if it were one-handed and could sort of fill that ballistic shield niche, I think a lot more people would end up using this gun, and a lot more people would enjoy the power behind this gun. But in general, shooting the crossbow feels natural. It's not hard to learn the bullet drop of the bolts. It has a very generous AoE. It's just not the greatest against medium type enemies. It's not bad at all, but it also, like I said, it's just not that special. definitely not mid, and I think people will just enjoy using a crossbow for the look of it, and I don't think anyone who picks up this weapon will be disappointed after they get the feel of it for a couple games. And finally, we get to talk about the amazing grenade pistol. Now, this is probably technically the best secondary in the game, but you can't really compare it to the Redeemer or any of the other secondaries because it's a utility weapon. It fills a completely different niche than any other secondary. It's a utility weapon in the fact that it can destroy bug holes and fabricators. It's obviously more similar to impact grenades than any secondary weapon. And like I said, if you're running the Eruptor or you're running an explosive weapon that you don't want to shoot too close to yourself, then be careful picking this up because you actually want a secondary that can deal with hunter swarms. So keep that in mind when deciding to use this or not in your loadout. But I think what more people are wondering is how does this stack up compared to impact grenades? Well, it says it does 600 damage on the card and impacts only do 400. So on the surface level, it seems strictly stronger than impact grenades. But I will say I noticed the splash radius of this grenade pistol is actually smaller than impact grenades. And that's because unfortunately you can't kill shredder tanks from the front with this, similar to how you can kill shredder tanks with impact grenades. Now, I had trouble getting a clip of this. I couldn't find the spot in my stream yesterday where I did run into shredder tanks, and I couldn't spawn any in on Helldive today. But I did test this against shredder tanks, and you can't just shoot the front of them with this grenade pistol. So I just am pretty sure that this has less splash radius than impact grenades. But at the same time, you still should equip this in your ballistic shield builds, and then you can take stun grenades simply because it can help you destroy fabricators, and it can still take out groups of enemies in a pinch, again, similar to impact grenades. And that's why this is just the best secondary in the game for me, because it has so much utility where you can have a slightly weaker impact grenade as your secondary weapon, but you can still bring stun grenades with you, and that's what's so awesome about it. So yeah, I do think it's slightly weaker impacts in general, because I think splash radius is a bit more important than that extra 200 damage on it, but at the same time, it's still good enough to equip stun grenades and bring this with you. So that's going to be it for my updated tier list and this video. Let me know in the comment section if you like this tier list format better than the classic S tier to F tier lists. I think this format does a better job at explaining the different weapon roles, and honestly, I'll probably stick to this style in the future anyway. So let me know in the comment section down below what you thought, and that's going to be it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.